Canada legalized cannabis to shrink the black market and make streets safer. But 6 years later, smugglers are busy, kids are getting into edibles, and fentanyl is ravaging neighborhoods. Did legal weed calm the chaos or help unleash it? Tonight, the hidden fallout no one told you about. Setting the scene. The promise versus the present. When Canada legalized cannabis in October 2018, the move was hailed as groundbreaking. Lawmakers promised a safer, regulated market that would pull billions out of the black market and redirect it into the legal economy. Within just a few years, the transformation was measurable. By 2024, the Canadian Cannabis Survey showed that 72% of cannabis consumers were buying from legal sources, compared to only 37% in 2019. This meant that millions of Canadians had shifted from buying unregulated products on the street to purchasing tested, tracked and taxed cannabis from licensed retailers. These changes were not just about consumer habits, they represented a structural shift in the cannabis economy. In Ontario alone, government data revealed that legal retailers sold roughly 409 million grams of cannabis in 2024, generating $2.15 billion in legal sales. The Ontario Cannabis Store, acting as the sole wholesaler, ensured that products were subject to strict quality standards, with mandatory lab testing for potency, pesticides, and contaminants. This level of oversight was unprecedented and intended to replace the uncertainty of the illicit market. Yet while the domestic market was becoming more transparent, a new issue emerged: international smuggling of Canadian cannabis. The Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, reported multiple large seizures in 2024, including a case where 40 kilograms of cannabis was intercepted en route to London, England. Investigations revealed that Canadian cannabis had developed a premium reputation abroad for its purity and potency, making it a lucrative commodity in countries where it remained illegal. This meant that while legalization had cut into the domestic black market, it had also inadvertently created a new global export demand. Adding to this complexity, organized crime didn't disappear with legalization. It adapted. The RCMP's Criminal Intelligence Service Canada reported that while illegal cannabis operations had declined, many criminal networks shifted their focus toward more profitable markets such as cocaine, methamphetamine, and, most dangerously, fentanyl. The same distribution routes and smuggling tactics once used for cannabis were now being used for far deadlier substances. The public conversation around drugs in Canada also began to change. As news outlets and social media filled with images of open drug use in cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Winnipeg, cannabis was often lumped into broader debates about drug policy and public disorder. Many Canadians struggled to separate the realities of cannabis legalization from the separate and more deadly opioid crisis, creating confusion about what was causing the visible changes in their communities. Job market and economic impact, shifts in legal and illegal channels. Legalization reshaped not only how cannabis was sold, but also how the cannabis economy functioned at every level. Licensed producers and retail shops created tens of thousands of jobs across Canada. Statistics Canada data shows that by 2023, the legal cannabis industry employed more than 151,000 people nationwide, from agricultural workers in greenhouses to retail clerks in city dispensaries. The shift from an underground to a regulated market meant that thousands of these workers now had formal employment protections and benefits. However, legalization also disrupted the livelihoods of those who had once relied on the illicit market for income. Small-scale growers and dealers who could not or would not transition into the regulated system found themselves squeezed out, while large corporate producers dominated the legal supply chain. Critics argued that this created a form of corporate takeover, replacing the black market with a heavily consolidated legal one. Supporters countered that this consolidation was necessary for ensuring safety, quality control, and compliance with federal regulations. Despite the legal market's dominance, the illicit market did not vanish entirely. Data from Statistics Canada indicated that in 2022, two-thirds of cannabis-related offences were still linked to illicit import or export, rather than possession or trafficking within Canada. This statistic underscored that smuggling, both into and out of Canada, remained a profitable avenue for organised crime, even in the age of legal weed. The economic incentives for smuggling were clear. Canadian cannabis could sell for 2 to 4 times its domestic price in markets like the UK, Australia, and parts of Asia. This price gap made export smuggling an attractive business for criminal groups who could exploit legal production channels to obtain product before diverting it overseas. CBSA's 2024 Year in Review highlighted increased efforts to target outbound smuggling through airports, seaports, and postal facilities, but the challenge remained significant. In this evolving landscape, the economic story of legalization was one of both success and adaptation. The legal industry flourished domestically, employment grew, and billions in revenue were generated. Yet the persistence of illicit channels, especially in global markets, showed that legalization was not a cure-all for the criminal economy. Public health and the zombie narrative. One of the most pervasive myths to emerge since legalization is the belief that cannabis use is responsible for the so-called zombie scenes in Canadian cities. These disturbing images showing individuals slumped over, staggering, or frozen in place are almost always linked to opioids, particularly fentanyl, and in some cases xylazine, a veterinary tranquilizer. These substances depress the central nervous system, slow breathing to dangerous levels, and can cause severe physical harm. Cannabis, by contrast, does not produce such effects, yet the public perception often conflates the two due to the visible drug crisis. The real cannabis-related health concern in recent years has been the rise in pediatric cannabis poisonings, particularly from illicit edibles that mimic popular candy brands. Since edibles were legalized in Canada with strict packaging and potency limits, Health Canada has documented a spike in accidental ingestions involving children under 5. Many of these cases involve illegal products with packaging designed to look like gummies, chocolates, or baked goods familiar to kids. Hospitals in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia have all reported increased emergency room visits linked to these incidents. Data from pediatric poison control centers confirms the trend. In some provinces, cannabis-related poisonings now account for up to a third of all pediatric poisoning hospitalizations. The JAMA Network. Open published a study showing that adolescent cannabis use increased by 26% in the years following edible legalization, with a notable rise in co-use with alcohol. While these numbers do not suggest a national crisis, they do highlight a specific vulnerability: children and teens being exposed to cannabis products that are far more potent and accessible than before legalization. British Columbia's separate decision to decriminalize possession of small amounts of certain hard drugs in 2023 further complicated the public's perception. While the policy was aimed at reducing the stigma of addiction and encouraging treatment, its side effect was an increase in visible drug use in public spaces. By 2024, public backlash prompted the province to recriminalize public drug consumption, a move aimed at restoring order while still pursuing health-focused strategies. Although cannabis was not the target of this policy shift, the broader conversation about drugs often painted all substances with the same brush. In the public health debate, the key challenge is separating cannabis issues from the opioid crisis while addressing genuine concerns like child safety, product regulation, and public education. Without this clarity, cannabis risks being mischaracterized in ways that undermine both effective policy and informed public discussion. Crime and organized networks. How criminals adapted. When cannabis legalization took hold in 2018, some optimists believed it would deal a crippling blow to organized crime. And in one respect, they were right. Many gangs that had relied on cannabis as a reliable, low-risk cash crop saw a major revenue stream dry up domestically. But organized crime is resilient. Instead of disappearing, these networks pivoted, using their infrastructure to traffic more lucrative and dangerous drugs. Intelligence reports from the RCMP's Criminal Intelligence Service Canada have consistently highlighted that illicit drugs remain the most profitable criminal market in the country. In the post-legalization era, fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine have become the new cash cows, commanding higher profit margins and, tragically, causing far greater harm. CBSA's 2024 enforcement statistics give a sobering sense of scale. That year, officers seized nearly 3,955 kilograms of cocaine, a staggering increase compared to pre-legalization years, alongside 4.9 kilograms of fentanyl, an amount that, given fentanyl's extreme potency, represents potentially millions of fatal doses. These seizures marked a 75% increase in fentanyl interceptions compared to 2023. In addition, more than 21,000 kilograms of other illicit drugs and chemical precursors were confiscated, further illustrating the breadth of Canada's transnational trafficking problem. Cannabis hasn't vanished from the organized crime portfolio, but its role has shifted primarily to export smuggling. The appeal is straightforward. While cannabis prices have dropped domestically due to oversupply, the same product can command 2 to 4 times the price in markets like the UK or Australia. This international demand has given rise to sophisticated smuggling operations using everything from commercial shipping containers to parcels sent through the mail. CBSA and RCMP have made multiple busts involving suitcases stuffed with cannabis flower, oils and edibles, all destined for foreign markets. The persistence of these export schemes reveals a key blind spot in the legalization framework. While the system is designed to regulate and track domestic sales, it cannot prevent legally grown cannabis from being diverted into illicit export channels once it leaves the production facility. Criminal networks exploit this gap, sometimes even infiltrating legal operations to siphon off supply. The RCMP has noted instances where individuals with ties to organized crime have sought positions within licensed cannabis companies to facilitate such diversions. Ultimately, legalization has changed the shape but not the presence of organized crime in the cannabis space. The black market for domestic consumers has shrunk dramatically, but the criminal economy remains alive and well, now more focused on dangerous synthetic drugs, while still capitalizing on global demand for Canadian cannabis. This reality complicates any simple narrative of legalization as either a total success or failure. The final balanced verdict. What worked, what didn't, and what's next? 6 years on, it's clear that cannabis legalization in Canada has achieved some of its most important goals. The domestic illegal market has been largely displaced, with surveys showing that legal sales now account for the overwhelming majority of purchases. Consumers have benefited from access to products that are tested, accurately labeled, and free from the dangerous contaminants often found in unregulated cannabis. Impaired driving rates linked to cannabis have declined, and legal retail has generated billions in economic activity while creating over 150,000 jobs. Yet the story is far from perfect. Legalization did not eliminate smuggling, it redirected it. The international appetite for Canadian cannabis, coupled with stark price differentials in foreign markets, has kept export trafficking alive. Domestically, organized crime has channeled resources into harder, deadlier drugs, contributing to an opioid crisis that now claims thousands of lives annually. These unintended consequences show that regulating one market doesn't erase the underlying economic and logistical networks that sustain criminal activity. Public health outcomes also reflect a mixed picture. While cannabis use among adults has largely stabilized, pediatric poisonings have increased, particularly from illicit edibles designed to resemble candy. Hospital admissions and poison control calls related to accidental ingestion have risen in multiple provinces, prompting calls for stricter enforcement against these unregulated products. At the same time, policy changes unrelated to cannabis, such as British Columbia's temporary decriminalization of certain hard drugs, have altered public perceptions of drug use and blurred distinctions between substances in public discourse. The lesson from 6 years of legalization is that policy cannot remain static. If Canada wants to sustain the gains of legalization while addressing its shortcomings, it must adapt. That could mean reviewing THC potency caps in legal edibles to reduce the appeal of illegal high-dose products, investing in outbound border enforcement to curtail smuggling, and maintaining competitive pricing in the legal market. It also means targeting the most harmful drugs like fentanyl through precursor control, financial sanctions against traffickers, and multi-agency task forces. In the end, cannabis legalization was never a silver bullet. It was a calculated step toward harm reduction, economic formalization, and public health improvement. In many respects, it has succeeded. But as the criminal economy evolves and new public health challenges emerge, the real test will be whether Canada can adapt its approach quickly enough to protect both the progress already made and the safety of its citizens. The choice is between complacency and continuous improvement. And for a nation that pioneered this bold experiment, the stakes couldn't be higher. Canada's cannabis story isn't finished. It's still being written. The question is, will the next chapter be shaped by smart, evidence-based policy, or by criminals adapting faster than we do? If you believe the truth matters, hit the like button so this conversation reaches more Canadians. Subscribe with notifications so you don't miss the stories they'd rather you never hear. And now, I want to hear from you. Should Canada focus on cracking down on illegal edibles, tightening the borders, or going after fentanyl with everything we've got? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's have the debate our leaders won't start.